The next thing we need to do to get started with Python is download a text editor so that we can actually write our code into it and get helpful hinting and things like that to make our lives easier. Visual Studio Code is actually created by Microsoft. It's free to use, and it's cross-platform as well. So even if you're following along on a Linux or Mac environment, this still works. So we're going to use this Visual Studio Editor. It's really popular these days. So go ahead and just download it, and we're going to run the executable. So now let's go ahead and run through the install. We're going to say yes, and we accept the terms, and we're just going to install it to the default location. And you can create the Visual Studio Code on the Select Start menu. That's always helpful. I'll even create a desktop icon. And yeah, let me see. So yeah, we want to make sure it's added to the path as well. That's important. And then go ahead and install it. All right, so now that we've done that, let's go ahead and launch Visual Studio Code. And this is just going to give you a folder. I already have some projects and everything open, but we're going to go ahead and create a new folder, and we're going to put this under our projects. I have a tutorials folder that I put all my tutorials under, and I already have a Python, so we're going to say Python v2. Wait, oh yeah. I need to create that folder, obviously. Python v2. All right, so now I'm going to select that folder, and this is going to open up into the folder that we just created. So let's create our first Python program. We're going to say new file, and we're going to call it hello.py. Now, in Python, you could type your code into a actual text editor, and it would work the same. Like if you said, you know what, this file is going to be called, I'm going to say, we'll do the same, print hello world. All right, and if I save this file, just using Notepad, and I'm going to go to my projects again, tutorials, Python v2. I'm just going to save it here, but if I said, you know what, change it to all files, and I say test.py, I can actually create a Python file. You can see I have the syntax highlighting and everything. Now, you might not have this coloring, and it may not even recognize it. So what we need to do is make sure you have the right extension installed. Click on this icon to your left that says extension, and in here we're going to say Python. Now, you're going to want to grab the biggest one that has 12 million downloads and 4.5 stars, and you're going to go ahead and install this thing. You can see I already have it installed, but when you install it, it's just going to restart. So make sure you install this plugin. Another thing you might want to do, well, yeah, this is really all we're going to need for this tutorial series. You're going to see some squiggly lines and things like that. Those are not errors. That's called linting, and linting is actually an optional thing. We can disable it if we don't want. And that's probably what we're going to do in this tutorial series, because a lot of linting has to do with more advanced concepts and coding habits and things like that you would learn along the way. But this is a beginner course, and we don't really want to get misguided or misdirected, you know, down like a side path that is just not necessary right now. So you can see in both cases I was able to create a Python file, one using Visual Studio, and we'll even say this is using Visual Studio. All right, and then then we have this test. So with two different files. Now, if we want to run our program, what I want to do is make sure I have the file that I want running selected. I'm going to click this little debugger icon, and then when I click play for the first time, you're going to have these configurations, and by default it's going to add a new configuration, but we can just select add configuration and click play. This is going to ask you what type of environment you want, and it should detect that you have the Python environment installed. It's going to look for Python on your path. So if Python can be found by Windows on your path, then this should work just fine. You're gonna select Python, and then here you can see that in a moment it's compiling, it's running, and things like that. And then you can see it does a lot of like basically just like warnings and like logging and just information that you might be interested in. You can actually disable that as well, but this is just running right here. And the debug console is probably the best thing to look at if you're just trying to get the output. But if you wanted to get feedback from what's going on behind the scenes, the terminal is the place to go. But look at the debug if you're just looking for any sort of console output and things like that. So you can see this is Visual Studio. If I go back to my file, I select the other one. I can run it just the same by clicking play. And obviously I'm going to select Python again, and then you can see that it says hello world. So it's pretty annoying to have to select your debug option every time you want to run the program, and that's really not what you want. So we want to make sure that we click this option and make sure the add configuration option, and then if you select Python, it's going to create this new directory with this VS Code with a launch.json file. And this is like where you can set it up to actually run Django projects, and it gives you starter code to how to get started with Django. So basically, when you're running from Visual Studio, you can pass in arguments and things like that to your Django application so that it does so it behaves in a certain way. So there's all kinds of different configuration options here. We're going to press Control S to save that config. Go back to our hello.py, and now if we have our debug option, we can go ahead and select one of these. You can just say Python current file. That's probably the easiest thing to do, but you have all these other options too if you're trying to run like a Flask or Django project. So let's go ahead and just press play. And now you can see it constantly is just like, we can just run play over and over again. You don't have to select it over and over and all that stuff. So that's pretty cool. So now with this cool Visual Studio Editor extension that we installed, Python is actually telling you about all these different little tiny things. It's like new line missing and stuff like that. So those are like tiny little things. But if you wanted to satisfy them, it's just telling you, hey, you need a new line right here, and then it's saying that you need a final new line, so like something like that, at least one. If I press Control S, some of these error messages start going away, at least that one. Even if I were to say, if I click on this little green icon, it also gives you the information as to what the error message is. So there's multiple places you can go. So if we want to change the behavior of this so that we're not getting all these different like nitpicky messages back, I want to go to File, Preferences, Settings, and this is where I have a few settings. This is where the Python linter is enabled and things like that. So you can see I have a special Django plugin because like there's different linting rules that you want to follow for Django versus other things, and that's why that's in there. But you can just add different settings. I even have TypeScript settings and stuff like that. Make sure there's always commas after every new setting that you're adding. And one of the things I want to do, there's actually, so I already have a pylint args for this this Django one. So it's just a list of string values, and we're going to touch on those in just a moment. But I'm going to go ahead and add this other value and remove this duplicate title. So now we have, I'm only concerned with problems that would result in the error of the file not compiling or running. So that is a much better user setting, I think, for just people that are just getting started. So again, like the nitpicky stuff, you don't see the warning messages. But if you end up doing something like some sort of keyword that doesn't exist and press save, then you're going to see that the problem still exists. It's like undefined variable. We have no idea what that is. Like you're trying to call this as like a function, it has no idea what it is. But yeah, so that's what you want, and that's what we're going to do. All right, guys, thanks for watching. We'll be back in the next video.